And then they contracted further, it got hotter, the helium began to react and produce the other elements that are fairly abundant: carbon, nitrogen, oxygen.
So stars fuse together smaller atoms to make bigger atoms. But how did these larger atoms get from the heart of stars to the Earth?
At certain moments during this process, the stars can become unstable, and then they spew out material. This happens in great explosions, supernova explosions.
And so it is the life and death of stars that have created the 92 elements, the underlying constituents of the universe, of planets, rocks, crystals, water, ants, and us, collected from space, scattered there by exploding stars.
We are literally the ashes of long-dead stars. If you're less romantic, we are the nuclear waste from the fuel that made those stars shine.
Everything we see around us now essentially was made by stars. This is actually something which our grandparents had no idea about. Everything came from stars. In trying to understand our cosmos, we're very much also trying to understand ourselves and how we got here.
Created in the heart of a star and recycled through different forms all over the galaxy, atoms are virtually indestructible.
A single atom, like, say, an atom of carbon, can't be created or destroyed by any process that goes on the Earth. Let's imagine one atom that's in a particular blood cell in my body now. At some stage, I probably breathe that in as carbon dioxide in the air. That carbon dioxide might have been put out from a chimney where coal was being burnt. And it would therefore be a relic of some primordial forest maybe 200 million years ago. We can trace it back further to when the Earth first formed. Some earlier star exploded as a supernova and flung out into space the processed debris of the nuclear fuel that kept it shining.
So the scientific quest to discover why we were here had answered at least the more straightforward question, how we were here. Our creation was part of a wider process that happens across space and throughout time, and it seemed to be very deeply ingrained in the laws of the universe. But scientists were soon to discover that a major part of the story of our creation was missing.
We could imagine a universe where there was nothing but atoms, but our universe seems to be rather more complicated than that.
In the search for an answer to the question, why are we here? Scientists had proved that we were made of the very same atoms that made up the entire universe. Over billions of years, the combination of atoms and gravity had created everything. Then out of the blue, we discovered that atoms are not the only ingredient of the cosmos.
When we look at the universe, there's no particular reason to believe we are getting a complete image of what's actually there. We've had some surprises. We've discovered that there's not just atoms, but there's a lot of stuff in the universe which isn't made of atoms at all. Dark matter. The first evidence for dark matter, in fact, goes back to the 1930s, long before I was born.
Galaxies rotate, and at their outer edges, the stars are traveling at phenomenal speeds. The only force holding those outer stars to the rest of the galaxy is the combined gravitational pull of all the atoms in the stars at its center. But when astronomers calculated the amount of gravity required to prevent those stars from flying off into space, they discovered that there simply wasn't enough matter in the galaxy to hold the outer stars in place. Something was very wrong.
By measuring, for example, the speed with which stars go round and round the centers of galaxies, like our own Milky Way, the stars go round too fast. And unless there is some gravitational confining force, some sort of invisible glue keeping the stars together, the galaxies would have just dissolved.
It was already realized then that some clusters of galaxies moving around, would have flown apart had they not been held together by a gravitational pull of something more than we saw. So that was the first intimation of dark matter.
But for many astronomers, the idea that there could exist in our universe a type of matter made from something other than atoms was just too strange to contemplate.
People didn't want to think that the universe was full of dark stuff that we couldn't study. And after all, justifying a huge investment in a telescope requires telling the funding agencies we're going to discover what the universe is made of. People were telling you, look, your telescopes only see a little bit of what is there, are not necessarily popular. So partly for that reason, and partly because there was no theory as to what the dark matter could be, that idea lay dormant. It was a niggling thought in the back of people's minds until the 1970s, when more direct and compelling modern evidence for dark matter was acquired, and then it was just staring us in the face. We couldn't ignore it anymore.
And when they calculated the amount of dark matter in the universe, astronomers were even more surprised. This mysterious material made up the majority of the universe, nearly 85% of it.
The realization that most of the mass in the universe is dark matter has come as a big shock to the community.
And we have no idea what it is.
Unlike ordinary matter that we understand and we know and love, we know how to make it, and we know its composition. We know relatively little about dark matter. The name dark matter just reflects the fact that we're talking about matter that does not emit light or radiation of any sort. We believe that the dark matter is made of elementary particles. These particles, which are still hypothetical, I should say, this is something that has yet to be confirmed in the laboratory, go straight through you, and you're none the wiser. And that makes it very difficult to detect these particles, because the way you detect the particles is by stopping it, intercepting it. But if you just go straight through the detector, then you don't know that there was a particle there. And so they're harmless from that point of view, but they're all over the place. There's billions of these dark matter particles crossing my hand every second as we speak, and you just don't feel it. They don't interact. They just do nothing.
In fact, it'll happily go right through planet Earth and out the other side without even interacting, which makes it feel almost metaphysical. If there's no experiment you can do which will let us capture one of these particles, how do we know that they exist?
The actual nature of the dark matter is a mystery. There are lots of candidates which could exist in the early universe, in the Big Bang, in the first microsecond. And if they are still around now, they would be candidates for the dark matter.
It's sort of a wacky idea. It sounds sort of frivolous to invent something which you can't see, can't touch, to say that it nonetheless exists. So far, we only know that they exist because of the gravitational pull. A very interesting question to me is the universe more complicated than it needs to be to have us here? In other words, is there anything in the universe which is just here to amuse physicists?